Tonight, the trial of a man who killed a Muslim man outside a Toronto mosque 2 years ago will begin February. And Canada will donate 200 Canadian-made armoured personnel carriers to Ukraine at a cost of $90 million. Later in the show, we look at how Muslims in India cope when the police bulldoze their homes.
It's induced trauma on these people, and it happens over and over again.
Assalamu alaikum and good evening. This is Muslim News Canada on Muslim Network TV. I am Catherine Bullock. The trial of the man who killed a 58-year-old Muslim man outside a Toronto mosque more than 2 years ago will start next month. Mohammed Aslam Zavis was stabbed to death in September 2020 while seated outside the International Muslim Organization in Toronto. Guillaume van Nutegem is charged with first-degree murder. The Crown and Defence agreed yesterday to a hearing on February 13th. The Canadian Anti-Hate Network alleges Nutegem's social media accounts show his connection to a neo-Nazi Satanist religion. The group has a loyal following and encourages ritual killings. Canada will donate 200 Canadian-made armoured personnel carriers to Ukraine at a cost of $90 million, Defence Minister Anita Anand has announced. The announcement came yesterday during Anand's visit to Kyiv, Ukraine. Anand says the vehicles will offer state-of-the-art weapons and technology. The vehicles will easily accommodate heavy weapons mounted on them. The vehicles are being purchased from a Canadian company, Rochelle, based in Mississauga, Ontario. The previous week, Canada announced it would donate a national advanced missile system to Ukraine. Combined with the land defences, military aid since 2022 amounts to $1 billion. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Canada cannot do much to help Afghans flee the country. The response comes after the killing of Mosque Nabizadeh, a former Afghan parliamentarian and women's rights activist. Her death this Sunday in her home has prompted calls to help Afghans leave the country. 6 MPs from Canada's political parties have released a joint statement saying they have been working since last October to bring Afghan female lawmakers to the country. Trudeau says the Taliban are not allowing people to leave, which is putting their lives at risk. The PM says Canadians will continue to be there for them.
I'm leaving because with such a privileged role comes responsibility.
New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has shocked the country by announcing she would resign from office in a matter of weeks. A global figurehead of progressive politics, she steered the country through natural disasters, the COVID pandemic, and its worst ever Islamophobic terror attack. Ardern says she is not stepping down because she thinks she cannot win the next election. Ardern won international acclaim for her empathetic handling of the 2019 Christchurch Mosque massacre, in which 51 Muslim worshippers were killed and another 40 wounded. New Zealand will choose its next Prime Minister in a general election to be held in October. Indian media are reporting that the Assam government will compensate families whose homes were bulldozed by police last May. And yet in December last year, over 300 families in the same state had their homes bulldozed by police. All of those affected are Muslim. To talk to us what is going on in India about bulldozing homes and how people are coping, we are joined now by Zahir Adil, campaign lead, Save India from Fascism, from Justice for All USA. Thank you for joining us. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam, Kathy. Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you. You are a regular on our show, always catching us up to date with the Save India from Fascism campaign. And this story of homes being bulldozed, it's tragic. I think of my own belongings, like what would I do, if the police came and bulldozed my home, the photos of my kids, or all my books, like my work, like how can people even handle that? Are you able to just shed light on how people are coping?
Yeah, I think can't handle it. That's basically it, and I think that is one of the plans of the Indian and the Assamese government. So they go in with very, very little notice, and they bulldoze these homes with all of their belongings, with all their papers. They are not given enough time to get things out very often. And so really there is no way for anyone to cope with that sort of, it's trauma. It's induced trauma on these people, and it happens over and over again. We've seen it in Assam, and we are seeing it in other parts of India also.
I mean, it is a trauma. I can't understand why the world isn't crying out in outrage. Russia is destroying homes in Ukraine, and we're sending in surface-to-air missiles and tanks to prevent that. But people in India are having their homes bulldozed by the Indian state. Nothing's being done to help them. Are you able to talk to us a little bit more about that?
Sure. Yes, unfortunately, India at this point is being seen as a counter to China. And whether I might agree with it or disagree, that is the way that the US government, as well as other governments in Western countries, are seeing India. So just to counter this perceived enmity from China, this perceived threat from China, they believe that India can play a huge role in that. Now, you talked about Ukraine. I think one of the differences between the Ukraine as well and India is that, again, it was brought upon the Ukrainian people by Russia, which is seen as a threat to a lot of Western nations. Now, whether we like it or not, it's a lot of these Western nations themselves that at least have some plans in place, some vehicles in place that allow for some human rights issues to be brought to them. But in the case of India, those vehicles are failing. They're failing us, actually. They're failing us as human rights workers. They're failing us as Muslims. They're failing us as humans.
So these administrations, and I think Canada's in the same position there in viewing India as the way to check against China, are they turning a blind eye to the bulldozing, or they don't know about it, or they're quietly doing what they call backroom diplomacy? Hey, India, we want you to be our ally, but stop bulldozing homes?
I think it's more of the latter, the last one that you mentioned. So it's not that they do not know about it. And one of the reasons that at least the United States and Canadian governments know about it is because of work by Justice for All as well as by Justice for All Canada. Because we keep reminding them, don't forget, this is happening in India. This is what we want you to do. So we keep at it. We keep reminding them that this is happening. Now, at least from the in the Canadian Parliament, we've seen a resolution that's been introduced on India. We've seen a resolution introduced on India in the US Congress. We've seen some slap on the wrist sort of statements made by Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. So it's really, you know what, India, we know this is happening. The civil society is really bothering us to do something about it. We really don't want to punish you. So just a slap on the wrist and maybe it will correct itself. I don't think it's going to do that. I think India just sees that as a weakness on the part of the United States as well as Canada.
Well, I mean, that's for sure. But let's talk a little bit about, in case somebody's watching and they have no idea what's going on. We're familiar with Israelis bulldozing Palestinian houses, but I don't think it's a very well-known story about what's happening to Muslims in India. Please fill us in just on the basics.
Yeah, so you got up a very good point about the Palestinian homes being demolished by Israel. And that also happens for one of two reasons. One is, of course, there is a little bit of retaliation whenever some Palestinian family might be involved in protesting against what's happening against them, really. So they're making victims out of the ones that are being persecuted by the Israelis itself. In the case of India, there are many different things happening. That happens in certain areas, such as the case of Afrin Fatima, whose home was demolished in Kanpur, and her father and she were named as taking part in protests against when a government leader called Nupur Sharma had said certain derogatory things about the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And although the home belonged to her mother, it did not stop the state government from going and demolishing the home because her father was the one who was accused of taking part in the protests. So, and that's only one example I'm giving you. It's happened in multiple cases. In the case of Assam, what the Indians do is just say that these are illegal encroachments on a certain piece of land, and they automatically just call these people who are living on that land as Bengali Muslims, meaning they term them as foreigners.
Mm.
And because they are foreigners, it is somehow okay for the Indians to go ahead and demolish the homes. Assam sees a lot of floods. A lot of these people say that their ancestry belongs in Assam itself, that they are Indian.
Mm.
But because of one or the other reason, and in India, there can be so many reasons for it. And in Assam, because they have floods all the time, a lot of these papers are lost.
Mm.
And if the person cannot produce the papers, then the government sees them as foreigners anyway. So here the onus is not upon the government to prove that the person is a foreigner. The onus is instead on the person to prove that he is an Indian. And if they don't have the right papers, or they are lost, or there might be some silly spelling mistake somewhere, it is taken as the person not being from India and their homes being demolished.
I wonder though, I mean, even if that was true, let's say, for the sake of argument, that they're foreigners, which I believe is not true. I believe some of them have 70 to 80-year histories in the region. But let's say it's true. Can you still go and bulldoze a home and leave people and destroy their belongings and leave them homeless?
Not really, no, because at the end of the day, these are humans over there, and even if they are displaced people coming from somewhere, then the government is obligated really to give them some piece of land. Now, if they do not like them building their homes or their little shanty huts on some particular property, then they need to be given an alternate piece where they can go. And I think they should be not only compensated, but the government should take care of giving them alternate accommodations. In many cases, they have also destroyed these people's farms. So it's not only their homes, it's also their livelihoods.
Are there voices in India speaking up against this?
There are, but I don't think they're loud enough. There are some civil society organizations, and alhamdulillah for India, at least the civil society organizations seem to be developed sufficiently. But they have been continually being marginalized by the pro-government, pro-establishment organizations and the court systems. The court itself has been compromised, the judiciary. And so they are finding it a very, very uphill task to really do something about it in India.
We're almost out of time, but let's say a viewer, they're living in the Canada or the US and they'd like to do something to help. I mean, what can we do?
Call your representatives. That is something that I cannot emphasize enough. But in this particular case, call the foreign ministry in Canada, call the State Department, because the representative is going to do little other than maybe release a statement or two. There is also something, if you go to the Justice for All website and look for Haldwani Action. Now, Haldwani is a town in the state of Uttarakhand where a 2-kilometer piece of land has been very, very strangely slated for the homes being demolished. That affects almost 50,000 people, with more than 3,000 homes being demolished, including schools, including colleges. And so we are asking the US government to speak against this. And there has been a stay. I know some of the viewers might be thinking that the Indian Supreme Court has issued a stay on it, but that's essentially the keyword there. It's a stay. We want the US government to tell the Indians, scrap the plans. No more demolition.
But unfortunately, we're out of time. I'm sorry to cut you. Please, viewers, go to the Justice for All website and to call your local representatives. Thanks for joining us, Brother Zahir.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you for watching. If you like what we do, please share, like, and subscribe. Stay safe and God bless.